Nina Lakhani, thanks so much for joining us to talk about your reporting.
Thank you for having me.
Let's first talk about the article you've now released on The Guardian. What did your reporting uncover about the price of running water here in America?
So we looked at not just the price, but the affordability of water and sewer across 12 diverse cities across the country. And what we found was that between 2010 and 2018, water has become an increasingly unaffordable burden for a growing number of Americans. And what we've seen over that period is public water utilities in cities using punitive measures to try and get people to pay their bills that they just can't afford to pay. So we've seen the use people's water being disconnected even during the coronavirus pandemic. That's continued in many places, and the use of liens. Liens are put onto houses by some cities for water debt as low as $200, $300, $400. And the house can then is at great risk of going into foreclosure. So we've seen this increase in punitive measures, and our reporting also, our analysis also shows that if there isn't like radical rethink about how water systems are funded in the US, then by 2030, water is going to be unaffordable for a really significant number of Americans across the country.
Your reporting looked at 12 cities in particular, including Austin. And what was so striking is that you report that we had the highest increase of all of those cities. What was the situation you found there?
Yeah, I mean, so between 2010 and 2018, water users in Austin saw their bills increase by a shocking 154%. So the average household bill by 2018 was $1,435 annually. That's a lot of money, and it's a massive increase. And what we found is that 60% of low-income households, low-income people in Austin, and we define low-income as people living under 200% of the federal poverty line, were living in neighborhoods where average bills were unaffordable. And by that, we mean that the water bill exceeded 4% of the household income. So we saw in Austin, like already there is a real breadth of problem, 60% among low-income residents, but it's also really deep. So 15% of people are already paying more than 12%. When they're not paying, they're being charged. Their water bills sort of cost 12% or more than 12% of their actual household income. So if you think for somebody, a household who is getting, say, $20,000 a year, that's $2,400 or more is what they're being charged by the water department. I mean, that is just unaffordable. And what we see going forward, if the rates continue to increase at the rates that they have been doing, by 2030, more than 80% of low-income residents in Austin will face unaffordable bills, and that's actually the equivalent of 25% of the total population. So it's really serious, and we've got here because federal funding for water systems has just plummeted since the late 70s, and so local water departments are left to raise the revenue they need, to upgrade infrastructure, to deal with pollution cleanups, to make, to create defenses to deal with the climate emergency, whether that in Austin, obviously we're talking about, increasing drought, more frequent drought and more serious drought. And they've done that really by increasing the rates at, way, way higher than, any consumer spending has increased. And by taking out loans, and obviously those loans also, the payments for those loans are also sort of go back to the consumer in the end.
What trouble could this cause Austin if it's not addressed and these increases just keep going up and up and up?
Well, the thing is, you can keep putting up your water bills, but if people can't pay them, they can't pay them. That's it. I mean, the fact, we're focused on affordability rather than just the price of water, because the best way for the water department to increase revenue is to have an affordable billing system. so that bills are based upon a household, a person's ability to pay. Other places have done that. Philadelphia is now coming up to the second anniversary of having this affordability program. Baltimore has passed a new law. It hasn't been implemented yet. If you charge people what they can afford, they will pay. People realize that water is an essential service that everybody needs, and like energy. And so people will pay. And, the energy sector has had, these affordability programs for a long time. So I think that you just can't raise more revenue by increasing bills, because people, those on low incomes just can't afford to pay. And obviously now with the massive economic fallout of the pandemic, more and more people are going to be struggling just to make ends meet every month. So they're going to have to make tough choices about what they pay. That they pay their medication, their gas, their electric, or water, or rent. So I think that it doesn't make fiscal sense, and it certainly doesn't make social sense that in 2020 in the US, people are having their water disconnected because they can't afford the bills. I mean, that doesn't happen that doesn't happen where I'm from in the UK, for example. It doesn't happen in most other countries. I mean, we cannot deny people that basic right because they can't afford a bill.
What was it exactly that led you down this reporting path? Obviously, the pandemic has raised questions about keeping hygienic and everything, and water plays a huge part in that. Was that part of the reason why you started looking into this?
No, actually, I'd started looking into it before. I mean, this story idea comes from the end of last year, and I'm the environmental justice reporter at the Guardian, at Guardian US, and so I'm interested in access, or the lack of access to water, clean running water, affordable water, as well as air pollution and food, etc. So water is one of the issues that I'm really interested in. And I saw some anecdotal stuff coming out. There was a couple of academic papers written about affordability, and the more I talked to people and the more I looked into it, I realized it was a really unreported burden, and becoming a really sort of key burden for people who are already struggling to make ends meet. And so, I got together with a economist, Roger Colton, who's done work on affordability of utilities for many years, mainly in the energy sector. And we came up, with this plan to look at 12 diverse cities to really try and get a national snapshot of where we are and where we could end up if there isn't, reforms to the way that water systems are funded.
Seeing that Austin had the highest increase, was that surprising at all to you compared to some of the other ones that you studied?
I don't know, really. I mean, it had the highest increase. I sort of read things about Austin's, water problem over the last decade, and people were obviously complaining about the bills. It didn't have the highest bill. Santa Fe had the highest bill, around just over $1,800, but Santa Fe had the lowest increase. So it was, in the case of Santa Fe, that it was already very high in 2010. We saw the highest bills, or some of the highest bills, in the drought-prone southwest of the country. So the climate crisis is absolutely playing a role. In sort of in the difficulties that water departments are having. I mean, they have just been left to find the money, to upgrade this aging infrastructure, which is, well over 100 years old in some parts of the country, and also to deal with these, emerging challenges of things like lead and algae and, the climate sort of, extreme climate events. And they just can't do that. And so, we also yesterday published an op-ed from Senator Bernie Sanders and Representative Brenda Lawrence. And they are two of the lead sponsors of a bill called the Water Act, which is calling for, significant amounts of federal funding every year for the next 25 years to ensure that every American has access to clean, running, affordable water.
Nina Lakhani, thank you so much for joining us and talking about this really revealing reporting. We appreciate it.
Thank you.